July 26, 2019. I am Logan Ray, and I am interviewing J. Kirkendall at the Newkirk Public Library, Newkirk, OK. I am a member of the Newkirk 4-H Go-Getters, and this is for the Oklahoma Military Hall of Fame project. What motivated you to join the military?
Well, when I was a kid, we used to have a TV show called Gomer Pyle, and I used to watch that every day after school. So I just, believe it or not, I always knew that I wanted to join the join the military. Of course, that was Marines, and I didn't want to be a Marine. But other than that, my main two motivations was I grew up here in Newkirk, so I wanted to not so much see the world, but just have an opportunity to leave home. And my other main factor was I wanted to go to college, so I knew that I would get the GI Bill, and that allowed me to, take college courses.
Tell me a little about your time in basic training.
Well, when I was in basic training, it was, I believe, 6 weeks. It was in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, and the dorm that I was in had a bad track record for failing fire alarm drills, and it just so happened that whenever I was doing the fire alarm, it was called dorm guard, and boom, they sprung the fire alarm drill on me, and I didn't do everything right, so I got to stay in basic training an extra couple of weeks. But I made it, and it wasn't that tough. It was just a lot of pay attention to detail was the main thing they were trying to teach you.
What was your primary job after training?
So I was a flatline jet engine mechanic on B-52s, and then after the Cold War ended, that was a SAC base which had alert facility. Well, the agreement was to deactivate all the SAC base alert facilities, so then that base more or less closed, or was closing, so I had enough time left to do a short tour, and I went to Kunsan, Korea, and it was a little different setup when you went from bombers to fighters. So then they let me stay on the flight line, which meant that I became an F-16 crew chief. So I worked on planes.
Were you deployed? If so, where and for what?
Technically, I wasn't ever deployed, but being in Korea was a short-term duty, and I was in Korea for 11 months.
What was the most demanding part about your deployment?
Over there, things were just different when you was overseas, and we basically never worked an 8-hour shift. So you either worked day shift or night shift, and you worked 12 hours a day, and then they rotated weekend shifts. So the bottom line was you worked a lot, and it was demanding because you was basically always sleep deprived, and you worked a lot of hours.
Where did you serve the majority of the time in service?
I was at Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas for the majority of my time. And then, like I said, after they deactivated the SAC bases, then I got sent overseas.
What rank are you most proud to have earned, and why?
I only spent 4 years in, so I never really got a whole lot of rank. But one thing that I was most proud of was the entire time I was active duty, I took college classes, and I graduated with a 2-year community college of the Air Force degree as a first-term airman, which was, pretty tough to do.
Which medals or citations are you most honored to receive, and why?
I was probably most proud of when I received my journeyman technician, which was considered a 5-level in my AFSC, and there was a training book this thick that you had to have all these things, all these tasks signed off on that you could be proficient to do at an inspection level. So in other words, it was pretty tough to get, and it was expected for you to get it, but once I got that, I'd really felt like I'd accomplished something.
Tell me about some of the special people you met.
Well, I still keep up with friends that I was stationed with still today. I talk on the phone mostly pretty regularly with the guy that was from West Virginia. His name's Ed. And then I got a buddy that's in Texas named Harley. And then I got a buddy that was from Oklahoma that lives over around Tulsa that's his name's Justin. And then a couple years ago we took a vacation across country, and the whole time I drove cross country I would stop in states and meet up with old buddies. And one was Billy and the other was Steve.
What was the best and worst military food you were served, and why?
Well, I was in the Air Force, so the cliche is we had good food, which we did. So as far as bad food, I can't honestly say that we had bad food, but it was a well-known fact that since I was on the flight line, anytime we could eat where the pilots ate, that was the best.
Tell me a funny story you experienced that could only happen in the military.
Well, when I was in Korea, the entire time I was active duty military is one long, never-ending funny story, of course, but one that I can talk about, I guess, is when I was in Korea, towards the end of my tour, I worked, they called it the alert facility, and it was the real world. It wasn't training. And it was kind of like being a fireman, where you would work 24 on and 48 off. And whenever you was, at the alert facility, if they sounded the siren, it didn't matter what you was doing. You had to drop what you was doing and get to that plane and get it off the ground. And when I first started working out there, they'd always say that sooner or later you're going to get caught more or less with your pants down. And so sure enough, it was right about bedtime, and I was in the bathroom, and that siren went off. And it's a funny story, but it's not funny when it happens to you, but you had to get out the door.
How did your military experience affect your life today?
So the two things that I probably use in my daily life the most, that I learned, from being in the military, would be attention to detail. I still, if I'm in traffic, I notice numbers, tag numbers. Everything that I see, I just notice stuff that most people would never pay attention to. And then as far as like working on cars or equipment or anything, probably one of the most valuable things that I learned was how to troubleshoot. When I was a kid, I could take stuff apart and I might have been able to put it back together, but it may not have necessarily been right. But through having been in the military, I can look at something and figure out what's wrong with it instead of just throwing new parts at something until it fixes it, which is, a big thing.
Do you have any other stories?
I can't really think of any. I mean, I've got a million stories, but nothing. I've been trying to think of the funny story ever since I got the paper, and it's one of those things where you just kind of get a mind block. And I mean, there were so many things. I mean, this book is pictures, and every picture in there is a funny story, but nothing really jumps off the page.
Thank you for your time and for your service.
You bet.